I was folding laundry in my one-bedroom apartment when my phone buzzed. It was late, nearly midnight, the city outside silent except for the occasional hum of a passing car. I picked up the phone expecting some work ping or spam. Instead, I saw her name, Mom. And beneath it, a single sentence. "You've always been the disappointment." No. Hi. No context. Just that. A blow disguised as a message. I stared at the screen, my hands still, the fabric slipping through my fingers. My breath caught somewhere between shock and something deeper, something older. Rage? No, not yet. First came the ache, a dull, familiar ache that started in my chest and spread like ink in water. That ache I'd known since I was a kid, sitting at the dinner table, trying not to say the wrong thing, trying to be enough. I reread the message. Again. I imagined her typing it probably after a glass of wine, sitting on her leather sofa in that house I'd never been welcome in. Maybe my brother had just visited, brought her flowers, made her laugh. Maybe she'd looked at a framed photo of the two of them and thought of me. The afterthought. The mistake. The one who moved too far, said too much, made her feel small by simply existing. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I could have sent her a list. Everything I'd survived, everything I'd built without her. I could have said, "Funny because I was just thinking you were always the wound I had to bandage in silence." But I didn't. I typed 2 words. Got it. That was it. 2 words to answer decades of hurt. I hit send. My hands were shaking, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was something else. A line had been drawn. She thought that message would cut me down. Instead, it woke something up. Because when a wound stops bleeding, it scars. And scars don't break easy. That night, I folded the rest of my laundry in silence, her words echoing not as pain but fuel. She'd made her truth clear. Now I was about to find mine. I was 8, the first time I realized my brother Jason was the son my mother orbited around. He'd scored a goal in a Little League game and she cried like he'd won Olympic gold. That same week, I brought home a crayon drawing I'd spent hours perfecting for art class. She glanced at it, smiled without really looking, then tossed it on the counter beneath the mail. I told myself it didn't matter. But it did. It always did. Jason was loud, charming, always knew what to say. I was the quiet one, the kid who read books too early, asked too many questions, cried when I was overwhelmed. Sensitive, they called me. Dramatic, too much. When I needed help, it was always, just get over it. When Jason messed up, excuses, forgiveness, praise for trying. Every Christmas, he got what he asked for. Bikes, gaming consoles, a new phone before I even had my first. I unwrapped clothes, socks. One year, a half-used sketchbook with clearance still stickered on the back. I smiled anyway. I always smiled. That's what you do when you know love comes with conditions you'll never meet. When I got older, it shifted. I became difficult, ungrateful. A lot like your father, she once hissed during an argument, and I swear I felt something shatter inside me. Jason would skip dinner, disappear for days, and still be welcomed back like a war hero. I'd speak up, and I was grounded for attitude. His messes were cleaned, my needs were burdens. Even our extended family played along. "Jason's the golden boy," they'd joke. "And what about you?" they'd ask with polite disinterest. I'd laugh, say something self-deprecating, then disappear to the kitchen to help with dishes, to stay useful, to be invisible in the way I'd perfected. By the time I was a teenager, I stopped asking for things. For attention, for understanding, for love. I knew where it would go straight to him. I learned to disappear in plain sight. The ghost child, the emotional mule, the family's quiet scapegoat. She called me a disappointment now. But the truth? She'd planted that word in me long before I ever had a chance to be anything else. I turned 10 on a rainy Tuesday. I remember the weather because I'd spent the entire week watching the forecast, praying for sun so I could have my party in the backyard. I'd made a list of 3 friends to invite. I'd even drawn little handmade invitations with colored pencils. I gave them to Mom the week before, excited, hopeful. She said, "We'll see, honey," and tucked them into her purse. That was the last I ever saw of them. The morning of my birthday, I came downstairs in my favorite shirt, already wearing a paper crown I'd made myself the night before. The kitchen was quiet, no balloons, no cake. No happy birthday, just Jason at the table, smug and smiling, holding up a ribbon from his school's science fair third place. He hadn't even told us he entered. Mom beamed. "My brilliant boy," she said, hugging him, ruffling his hair. Dad nodded with a rare look of pride, sipping coffee like he'd just watched a miracle unfold. I waited. I stood there, crown on my head, handmade cards in my backpack, smile wavering. Nothing. No one even glanced my way. I cleared my throat, small and uncertain. "It's my birthday," Jason rolled his eyes. "You mean my award day?" Mom laughed like it was funny. "We'll celebrate later," she said, distracted. But later never came. No cake, no dinner, just leftover lasagna and Jason's ribbon placed in a frame by the end of the night. I went to bed early, taking the crown off before brushing my teeth. I tucked it into the trash under some tissues so no one would see it. I cried as quietly as I could. That was the year I learned how it felt to be invisible on the day you're supposed to matter the most. How it felt to sit with that tight, quiet ache in your chest and pretend it didn't hurt. How it felt to know your presence was background noise in a house built around someone else's spotlight. They didn't even forget. That would have been kinder. They chose not to remember. That night, I made a promise to myself next year I wouldn't count on anyone to make me feel special. I never did again. By 13, I stopped waiting for recognition. While Jason got braces, a new bike, and driving lessons, I got silence. Not punishment, not cruelty, just the quiet neglect that teaches you not to ask for anything. My way of fighting back wasn't loud. It was work. Babysitting for neighbors after school, folding clothes at the local laundromat on weekends. Saving every crumpled dollar in a shoebox under my bed. I paid for my own school dance dress when Mom said she was too tight this month. I hemmed it myself in the bathroom mirror while Jason bragged about the suit Dad rented for his debate meet. He always had what he needed: tuition covered, gas money, food in the fridge with his name on it. They called him a growing boy. I was just there. I picked up more jobs: dog walking, dishwashing, tutoring, anything that paid. My grades stayed high, not because anyone cared, but because I saw them as my ticket out. Jason coasted through, supported, shielded from failure. When he crashed Dad's car, they said, "Boys will be boys." When I missed one math quiz after working an overnight shift, I was irresponsible. I started walking home alone from school, headphones in, tuning out the world. My friends knew not to ask me to hang out after class. I was always working. One time, a teacher pulled me aside and asked if everything was okay at home. I lied, said I was saving for college. That wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the full truth either. Truth was, I didn't trust home to give me anything. Not food, not help, not comfort. I learned how to cook eggs by watching YouTube on a borrowed phone. I learned how to fix my own bike tires because Jason never let me borrow his. I learned how to keep my head down, eyes forward, heart locked up. By 17, I had a plan: scholarships, part-time jobs, internships. I was going to get out, not with their blessing, but in spite of them. While Jason planned gap years and talked about finding himself, I was already building something, scraping it together from nothing. No one handed me anything. No cushion, no net. So I became my own. Success never felt like a win in my family. When I landed my first salary job at 23 after years of juggling part-time shifts and eating ramen in a shoebox apartment, I called my mom, hoping maybe this time she'd be proud. Her response? "Don't let it get to your head." "No. Congratulations. No. I'm happy for you. Just a warning." As if my hard-earned stability was arrogance in disguise. I hung up the phone that day with a strange mix of anger and guilt. I should have expected it, but part of me still wanted to believe she'd be different. I kept rising. Promotions came. Raises. I bought my first car. Paid off student loans. Moved into an apartment where the walls didn't flake when it rained. Each milestone meant freedom. But to them, it meant distance. My success became a threat, not a triumph. And every time I shared something good, I saw it in their faces, that flicker of discomfort. "You think you're better than us now?" Jason once said at a family dinner, voice dripping with disdain. He laughed like it was a joke, but his eyes weren't smiling. Mom echoed it days later during a call. "You've changed," she said. "You act like we're beneath you." No, I thought. I just finally stood up. Finally stopped asking for permission to exist fully. But to them, strength looked like betrayal. I became the one who doesn't come around much. The one who always has something to prove. They didn't see the nights I cried in silence, the panic attacks in bathroom stalls, the loneliness that came with outgrowing people who never believed in me. They saw armor and called it ego. So I stopped sharing. I learned to shrink the good news, to smile politely when they downplayed my wins, to nod when they said I was lucky as if it hadn't cost me everything to get here. Being strong, in their eyes, meant I no longer needed love, no longer deserved grace, but strength wasn't something I was born with. It was something I built, out of the rubble they left me in. It was Jason's baby shower. His girlfriend was 6 months pregnant, and Mom had gone all out catering, decorations, monogrammed party favors. I showed up late, intentionally. I debated not going at all, but guilt still had teeth back then. I walked in with a wrapped gift, small but thoughtful. A high-end baby monitor, top of the line. I didn't expect a red carpet, but I also didn't expect what came next. Mom saw me across the room, her expression tightening like I'd crashed a private event. She hugged me, air only, then leaned close and whispered, "Try not to make this about you." I blinked, stunned. "I'm not," I said quietly, the gift still in my hands. She pulled back, smiled like nothing had happened, and turned toward a group of neighbors. For the rest of the afternoon I floated. People asked me what I was doing these days. I gave them the short version project manager at a growing tech firm. Mom would swoop in every time. "She works on computers," she'd say, waving it off, changing the subject to Jason's job at a local dealership. "He's doing so well." Later, during the toast, she raised her glass and said, "Jason's always been such a blessing. He never gave me trouble. Always made me proud." I felt the words like a slap. It wasn't subtle, it was a scalpel, slipped between my ribs with a smile. People laughed, clinked glasses. I stayed silent, eyes locked on my untouched drink. My heart pounded. My fingers curled around the stem of the glass like I was holding back something primal. I bit my tongue, hard. But something inside cracked. It wasn't just the toast. It was years of them pretending I didn't bleed when they cut me. Years of swallowing slights and framing them as misunderstandings. Years of hoping if I just achieved enough, they'd see me, love me. I set my glass down and walked out. Left the gift on the table. Didn't say goodbye. Outside, the air was thick and warm. My hands were shaking. I didn't cry. Not then. I just kept walking. Something was changing, and this time, I wasn't shrinking to fit anymore. It started with a phone call I let go to voicemail. Mom had called twice that week, first about Jason's car breaking down, then about some fundraiser she wanted help organizing. I was already juggling back-to-back meetings, a deadline looming like a thundercloud, and frankly, I didn't have the time or energy to bail them out again. I texted back instead, "Can't help this time. I've got too much going on." No excuses, no sugarcoating, just the truth. She didn't reply right away. A full day passed. Then, late the next night, her message came through. "You've always been the disappointment." No punctuation, just those words sitting there like a final verdict. My heart didn't race this time. It didn't break. It just hardened, like steel being cooled in silence. I stared at the screen, rereading the line, half waiting for a follow-up, maybe a "sorry" or "I didn't mean that." But nothing came. I sat there on the edge of my bed, back straight, hands limp in my lap. That sentence, 7 words, felt like a closing door. No, not closing. Slamming. I'd spent years walking on emotional eggshells, trying to make her proud without ever really knowing what that meant. I got the grades, paid my own rent, built a career from the dirt up. But none of it ever counted. Because I wasn't Jason. Because I was loud when she wanted quiet. Because I wanted more than what she was willing to give. I scrolled up in the thread back to texts from years ago. Holidays, missed calls, short, clipped conversations, her tone always distant, me always trying. The pattern stared me in the face. Every time I said no, she heard betrayal. Every time I drew a line, she called it abandonment. And now, this. This wasn't disappointment. This was punishment for growing without her permission. So I replied the only way I could, the only way that wouldn't give her more fuel, more room to twist it. Got it. 2 words that looked like surrender but weren't, not even close. Those 2 words echoed back at me long after I sent them. I laid awake that night, The glow of the phone screen burned into the dark, those blue message bubbles like gravestones marking every attempt I ever made to earn something I never would. Got it. Not, I'm sorry you feel that way. Not, why would you say that? Just, got it. And for the first time in my life, I meant it. It wasn't an agreement, it was a recognition. A final, sharp moment of clarity. She hadn't said anything new, she'd just finally said it out loud. What I'd always suspected. What she'd implied in 1,000 different ways with her silence, her passive-aggressive digs, her always-too-late affections. This wasn't a sudden fracture, it was the last crack in a foundation that had been crumbling since childhood. The truth was, she hadn't disappointed me with that message. Not anymore. You can't be disappointed by someone once you stop expecting them to show up differently. That night, I stopped writing the story the way she wanted it told. I stopped casting myself as the failure, the burden, the ungrateful child who dared to want more. I wasn't broken. I wasn't cold. I wasn't unlovable. I was exhausted from carrying a family's guilt on my back and still being told it was never enough. So I got it. I really did. I got that her love had conditions. That my worth was tied to my compliance. That the only way she knew how to connect was through control, and when that stopped working, she weaponized shame. She could keep her narrative. I was done starring in it. The next morning, I blocked her number. I didn't do it in anger. I did it in peace. The kind that comes when you finally let go of a rope that's been burning your hands for too long. Got it wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of telling myself the truth. I didn't fail her. She failed to love me without needing to tear me down first. After I blocked her number, I sat on my couch in silence. No music, no TV. Just the hum of my fridge and the buzz in my chest that hadn't left since the message. My phone sat face down beside me, but my mind wouldn't turn off. I picked it up again, not to unblock her, but to look. I opened our old messages, scrolling up through the years, like flipping through a scrapbook of slow, silent bruises. There it was. Her asking for rent help when Jason lost his job. Me offering to cover a month. Her reply, only a month? A holiday text I sent 2 years ago. Merry Christmas, love you. Her response came 3 days later. Busy week, hope you're well. A voicemail from last year, her voice tight, clipped. We were hoping you'd help fund the family reunion Jason can't. You know how hard things are for him. No thank you for the flight I paid for. No, I miss you. Just. Expectations wrapped in guilt. Further back, when I moved into my first real apartment proud and broke, I'd sent photos. She replied, could use curtains, looks cold. The job promotion I texted her about. Her response? Don't work yourself into a breakdown. Nothing was ever celebration. Only correction. Minimizing. Warnings. Dressed as concern. I found one message that stopped me cold. From 5 years ago, after I paid for Dad's hospital copay without asking, she wrote, you always think you're the savior, you're not. I'd forgotten that one. Maybe I'd buried it, but now it surfaced like a body in still water. And it all clicked. This wasn't about a bad week. A single fight. That message, you've always been the disappointment, wasn't a peak. It was a summary. A distilled drop of poison that had been in the water the whole time. The kindnesses I remembered, they'd been crumbs. Enough to keep me close. Enough to make me question myself. This wasn't a relationship, it was a transaction I didn't consent to. And the cost had always been me. I called Leah. She was my college roommate, now a therapist in Chicago, and one of the few people who knew how deep my family wounds ran even if I'd never spelled it all out before. When she picked up, I didn't even say hello. I think my mom is toxic, I said, the words spilling out like air after drowning. There was silence on the other end, soft, intentional. Then Leah exhaled. I've been waiting for you to say that. I sat down on the floor, my back against the kitchen cabinet. I didn't realize I was crying until I tasted salt. For a moment, I felt ashamed. Like naming it out loud made me weak, dramatic, ungrateful. But Leah's voice cut through that noise with one word. Finally. So I told her. Everything. The text. The birthday she forgot. The time Mom made me feel small at Jason's baby shower. The time she called my raise a phase. Every moment I'd swallowed for years trying to protect a relationship that never protected me back. She made me feel like I owed her everything just for existing, I said. Leah didn't interrupt. She didn't try to fix it. She just held space, her silence, a kind of safety I hadn't known I needed. Then she said, Julia, you've been conditioned to believe that her love was something you had to earn, but love that makes you shrink isn't love, it's control. I sobbed. Really sobbed. The kind of crying that doesn't make noise, just full body shaking, like something old and infected was finally leaving. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't ungrateful, I wasn't the villain in her story. I was someone who had spent my entire life auditioning for a role I was never going to get. That night, something shifted. The shame started to unstick from my skin. I felt it, the beginnings of something new. Not forgiveness, not yet, but truth, clarity. And underneath it all, the fragile roots of self-worth finally pushing through the dirt. She'd sent me a sentence she thought would break me. But I was starting to realize it wasn't my story she got to tell anymore. The morning after my call with Leah, I opened my laptop and pulled up a blank spreadsheet. I titled it, Things She Still Has Access to. It felt cold, clinical, but I needed to see it, all of it. I started with the obvious. Emergency contact forms. She was still listed for my job, my doctor's office, even my apartment lease. Joint bank account, a leftover from when I helped them out during Dad's recovery. I'd forgotten it even existed. Social media. She wasn't active, but she watched quietly, passively, like a hawk in the rafters. Photos. She had pictures of me in her house, but none of them past 2018. It was like I'd been frozen in time the moment I started setting boundaries. And then the harder stuff. Her voice in my head, the internalized flinch every time I succeeded and felt the urge to downplay it. Her approval I still secretly chased. The guilt I felt for needing space. That one stung the most. So I started cutting cords. I removed her from my emergency contacts, called HR and had her name scrubbed from all files, closed the joint bank account, transferred the leftover $46.88 to a private savings account and deleted the app. I logged into every platform and blocked her, not in anger, but in quiet finality. I changed my will, updated my power of attorney. Then I wrote down 3 rules and taped them inside my desk drawer. This one. No contact isn't cruel, it's protection. 2. Guilt is not a reason to open the door. 3. Your peace is not up for debate. I didn't cry that day. I didn't rage. I worked like someone building a firewall. One click, one update, one form at a time. Every action chipped away at the hold she had over me. I'd spent years being her emotional first responder. Now I was walking off the job. It started with a cousin's text. Hey, everything okay with you and your mom? I ignored it. Then came another, Aunt Denise. She's really hurt, Julia, says you won't even return her calls. I hadn't told anyone yet. I wasn't broadcasting it. But Mom was. She'd lit the match and started the fire herself, then stood in the middle of the flames screaming victim. I opened the family group chat. I hadn't read it in months, muted for peace. But that day, curiosity got the better of me. The thread was buzzing. Mom, I gave her everything, and this is how she treats her own mother? Jason chimed in minutes later. You've always been dramatic, Julia. Nothing's ever good enough for you. I laughed. Actually laughed. That hollow, breathy kind, the kind you let out when you realize they're all reading from the same tired script, the one where I'm selfish for saying no, ungrateful for setting boundaries, cold for protecting myself from their chaos. No one asked why I blocked her. No one asked what she said to push me there. Because none of them really wanted the truth. They wanted the version where I'm the problem. That version's easier, cleaner, safer. I typed out a reply. Deleted it. Typed again. Deleted again. They didn't want understanding, they wanted compliance. They wanted me to come back, tail tucked, ready to apologize for existing too loudly. So I said nothing. Silence, I realized, was its own kind of power. I didn't need to defend myself. I didn't owe them a press release. That night, I got a private message from my younger cousin Elise. Just so you know, I see what's happening. You're not crazy. I've felt it too. And just like that, a crack appeared in the wall they'd built around me. Let them gossip. Let them dramatize. Let them tell their side. Because I finally had mine and I wasn't afraid to live in it anymore. I hadn't planned to send anything else. Blocking her should have been the end. But when the family chat kept buzzing, when Jason's messages turned nastier, when Mom posted some thinly veiled status on Facebook about daughters who forget where they come from, something shifted in me. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even hurt anymore. It was precision. I sat at my desk, the room lit only by the glow of my monitor, and typed what would be the final message. Short, clean, sharp enough to slice through years of noise. You made your choice, I've made mine. Don't contact me again. No preamble, no justifications, no apologies. A line drawn not in sand, but in stone. A closed door, welded shut. I stared at the screen for a long moment. My thumb hovered. Then send. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't care if one came. The point wasn't to get her attention, it was to reclaim mine. I deleted the thread right after, cleared the chat history, and turned my phone off. That night, I slept deeper than I had in months. No buzzing, no guilt, no war in my chest between love and self-preservation. Just silence. The kind that doesn't feel like loneliness. The kind that feels like breathing. The first week was strange, quiet, empty in places I hadn't realized they'd occupied. I reached for my phone out of habit, fingers hovering over her name even though it no longer existed in my contacts. The absence wasn't pain, it was muscle memory. Like learning to walk without a limp you've had your whole life. There were moments when I almost called, during a hard workday, when I found an old photo in a drawer, when I passed a bakery that sold her favorite lemon tarts. Grief trickled in not for her but for the version of her I used to hope existed. But then I'd remember. The text. The guilt. The way they all rallied to defend the person who broke me while ignoring the pieces I had to sweep up alone. So I poured myself into rebuilding. I picked up extra hours at work not to escape, but to grow. I reconnected with friends I distanced myself from during the chaos. I joined a book club. I started therapy. My therapist, Ava, asked me in our first session, "What does peace look like to you?" I said, "Quiet that doesn't feel like punishment." She smiled. "Then let's find that." And we did. I bought plants, filled my apartment with life. I learned to cook not just survive eating but real meals, meals that made my space smell like home. I called Leah more. She checked in often, not to fix me, just to remind me I wasn't alone. One Sunday, over coffee, I said out loud, "I think I've been carrying a version of family that never actually existed." Leah nodded. "Then it's time to build your own." So I did. Not blood-tied, not obligation-bound, but chosen, intentional. Friends who showed up without strings. Colleagues who respected boundaries. People who saw my strength and didn't shrink in its presence. I stopped apologizing for needing space, for not attending holidays, for wanting peace. The noise faded. The guilt died. And in its place, something steadier grew a life where I no longer had to perform worthiness. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had my own. It was raining, but soft, the kind of rain that doesn't rush, just lingers like it has nowhere else to be. I sat on the balcony of my new place, legs tucked beneath me, coffee warm in my hands. The city was slower here. Quieter. The kind of quiet that doesn't echo, just settles. The lease was in my name, paid for with my own money. The furniture? Chosen by me. No one else's opinion, no one else's fingerprints, just mine. A photo rested on the shelf beside me. Not of family, but of a mountain trail I'd hiked alone last fall. I'd stood at the summit, wind in my hair, lungs burning, heart light. I'd smiled not for a camera, not for anyone else, but because I was proud. Just me, and that was enough. That's what today felt like. A summit. No parade, no applause, just the knowledge that I'd climbed out of something no one else had seen and refused to be buried in it. My phone buzzed once on the table. A number I didn't recognize. I didn't pick it up. I didn't even flinch. I just turned the screen over and left it face down. Because the truth had settled in my bones now, steady and unshakable. She was wrong. I was never the disappointment. I was just inconvenient to control. That wasn't my shame to carry anymore. I'd spent years thinking healing would be loud, dramatic, some big confrontation, a movie ending. But it wasn't. It was this. Quiet. Unremarkable maybe. But real. Me breathing. Me choosing. Me not checking for her name in every shadow. This was what peace looked like. It wasn't her forgiveness. It wasn't the family's approval. It was the stillness in my chest when I said no and didn't explain. It was the freedom in my footsteps when I walked into a life where I didn't need to shrink to be loved. It was knowing that the door I'd closed behind me no longer led to anything I missed. I took a sip of my coffee. The rain danced on the railing. Somewhere below, the world kept spinning. And I sat still, whole, untethered, finally mine. This story was brutal, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.